Hi, it's Michelle Turner. I'm author of You Can't Get to Mars Without Me. I wrote this book really, and that's why it's called this, because as more and more I developed my work as movement lesson, and I'm a movement specialist, I have my own modality of movement lesson, I kept saying that from what I'm learning, they're not going to get to Mars without me. Why? We have a very short lifespan in space, in outer space, for astronauts, really not more than a year where the body starts breaking down. Now, I can't do anything about the radiation, but I can do everything for the manipulation of movement in space and outer space. And really, my inspiration first came from my son. So my son was fine at 13 months, and literally within a week, this is what I had. He lost all of his skills. So here he's independently standing. He could cruise down the hallway, eat, talk, and all of that. And here, literally, he's W-sitting. First of all, he's lost all his dimples. What's really telling, and I didn't realize this now, he's stabilizing his head with his vision. He's actually holding up his head with his eyes, and he's also doing it with his tongue, right? So he's legally blind, and he's drooling, and he's got the chin and all of this sort of stuff. You can even see the muscles. So he lost about 60% of his muscle mass, and he's hypotonic. They told me he would never walk or talk again, right? And this is my journey. I learn every day, and I'm here to help you learn, right? We go back to some key people, right? Really, Albert Einstein is amazing. There's a lot of amazing people in the world of physics. But this also was my inspiration, was a shuttle. So I was actually reading a book in 2014 on Einstein, and the shuttle came up with my boys. Now, the shuttle retired in '09. It really didn't go up a lot, so my kids missed that history. There was something about the shuttles, the way it housed on the rocket boosters, the evidence of escape velocity and the role of the rotation out to leave our planet was very vivid, because you had the white jet, rocket going off the boosters. Boosters were different color, and that spin was so evident. It's evident in any rocket that has to go up. For escape velocity, you have to have rotation to leave Earth. About 3 hours into it, I said, it can't be that simple. Any person with special needs doesn't have rotation. Through years of my research, I started realizing, well, astronauts don't have rotation in outer space. And in 2019, I was inspired by Ascent in Gravity by Marcus Brown, and he claimed, again, which is true, that there's very little physics to the human body other than putting the arm up, and gravity's very weak. Although I'm standing in the ground and gravity's pulling me to the ground. Pulling is a big option word for what's going on, but you really don't have. The gravity is a very weak force, but it's a very strong force. And so the confusion is there, especially on how we organize within gravity. And that's where we're coming in with this course, coming into gravity and movement, of learning about gravity, how gravity is, how we organize within gravity, and then also when gravity fails us, like you saw with my son. So again, time and space are modes by which we think, not in conditions, but in which we live. Albert Einstein really looked at space and gravity, meaning space between you and I, right, as much as space in between to the outer. And also where Albert Einstein was quite interesting too is because, again, he didn't have this visualization, right, of a rocket, because we weren't invented yet. If you look at really how physics has been presented, a lot has to do with, are we chasing technology or bringing technology into the forefront? So in his mind's eye, he did something similar where he put himself into a rocket or something, and he went with the speed of light, an example, and did that from the train, balloon on the train. He was a real three-dimensional thinker, which a lot of people don't have. It's something that I possess as well, and I didn't realize that I was different from you or I, and I really want to use this course to show you of what it's like to not look at something in a two-dimensional, but in a three-dimensional, but with true movement. So with Newton's gravitational laws, you're saying, again, a particle attracts to another particle in the universe using a force that is directly proportional to the product of the masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance of the center. Okay, what that means is that opposites attract and equal forces, right? But what's also interesting, though, about Newton's law is that if I, and you can do this with someone that you're partnering with, but if I put my hand against you and I asked you to push back at me, when we're here without rotation, right, if I give you more force, you'll give me more force back, or my force will then knock you over. But if I apply the same force but use rotation, you can't gauge against me. And I can go past your force, but I don't necessarily have to knock you over. However, I can. You see these dynamics in martial arts, right? The blocks and all of this. You will start seeing the modality of rotational movements for functional movements really at a heightened sense. Why is that important? Because again, there's not one movement that an astronaut can make in outer space that has functional movement, because they don't have rotation. They also don't have gravity, but they don't have rotation. And rotation is the key needed for the cognitive synapses or body synapses. It's not a muscle-based thing. So again, when you're looking at something like this, rotation, 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 it shows up from our vision down to our pinky toe, right? This here, now you're going off of percussive forces that you're going in here, but at the same time you're using rotation. Now at this point, the bicycle is exciting to a lot of people because you're actually then orbiting. And this is one of the few things that you really can get to move and orbit the Earth, because again, you're using rotational dynamics in proportion with your system and the Earth's rotational dynamics, right? So this is some of my thoughts. Within the complexities of the human form, there are countless similarities. However, as there are with no two humans that are the same, no two humans share the same movement vocabularies, the development on how they oppose and succumb to gravity are consistently different individuals and often complex. So what you're looking at is, again, no two human beings are the same. How did I start looking at that? Really was a natural childbirth. I'm a woman, you might be a woman, you might not be. But when you look at it, doesn't matter where you are from, natural childbirth is the same through the pelvic floor. And the rotation is the first rotation is assumed by the human body is actually during the delivery. So this is where a lot of people come to me because they didn't have a natural delivery, they had a surgically or a trauma-based delivery, and now the system is traumatized because that rotation never set up in the system. So that's where I started looking at rotation, and I wanted to prove my sciences with outer space, and through that can prove gravity and how we organize within gravity. So to give me a bicycle and give this gentleman a bicycle, you can say it's muscles, right? But it's also vision, it's fine motor skills, it's dexterities, it's spatial orientation, it's proportionness, but it's their ability to where they are in succumbing to gravity and where they're opposing gravity. Now you and I, if I go to reach out to you and such, I'm not worried about me falling. Even though I might have boxes all around me right now or something obstructing me, I have spatial orientation. I can see out of my peripheral. I can manipulate that. Now maybe my grandmother can't. And their first thing is, ooh, I don't want to fall down. Now I lose my vision. You start to see those kind of things. They're organizing to succumbing to gravity, right? These are some of the things you're going to be learning in the courses. They come in the later theories of my gravity. Starting from like theory 15 to 17. But with physics in general, with human beings, the biggest thing that you have to realize is that we are not linear beings, right? It's a real difficulty, even for me to say right or left, right? Because that's not how we organize. Right or left is a description, and this is a movement vocabulary. Right or left is a description that I use to talk to you. So if I want to say go to McDonald's, let's say, I'm going to say make a left, make a right, go straight, etc. These are what we've called universal, movement vocabularies that you and I concur on. But if I go to shake your hand, right, I, yes, will naturally swing out with my right hand. But if I have cerebral palsy, let's say, or for stroke, or I don't have a right hand, I might have to organize myself differently and to offer myself to you to shake your hand, right? That seems easy enough to understand, right? But when a baby or someone is moving, right, we do not have an access point, nor does the planet Earth, really, in that reason, because the way that the inner cores are going around each other. We're going to be learning about that in the next webinar that you're going to be a part of, because I'm going to start describing what is motion, which is what most physicists go with, where I go at it with movement. And there is a difference between movement and motion. And part of that is because I do not have a fixed point in space, and nor do you. You might say my center point of gravity is here, but if I come down over like this, my center point of gravity is now immediately adjusted by my nervous system, my whole entire body, not just my brain. And if that doesn't seem correct to you, look at a newborn baby. A newborn baby doesn't say, hey, I'd like a cold one, it's over there in the fridge. They don't have that kind of spatial orientation, cognitive awareness, or movement vocabulary or life experience, right? They're in a neutral zone, they're in weight transfer, not in counter-oppositional mode. That right there could be going into, let's say, cerebral palsy. But you're going into those kind of things. You have to go back to the dynamics of where movement came from. Why? Because in the womb, there is no opposition to gravity, right? There's very little gravity, more so because there's no elimination by the human body. We don't breathe in the room, we don't eliminate, we don't eat, right? So to say gravity is the same, it's just the amniotic fluid, is actually not true, because we are not in elimination. The second we are exposed to gravity, the elimination happens, where again I'm breathing, I'm forcing my chest cavity against gravitational forces. So you see that in outer space, and that's why you'll see the expansion of the head and all of that, and the eyes and that, because it's actually almost going back into a womb-like cognitive neurological behaviors. So we need to look at movement, momentum, acceleration, and understand where it all develops, because that's in our nervous system, right? That's our foundation, and that's what you're really going to get out of the course. So whether you're looking, like if you're a bio student, you're looking to actually put someone out in outer space or yourself, that's true. But really in this course, you're going to learn how you move here, right? And where movement comes from. So any kind of medicine, sports medicine, all of these are going to be a benefit for your lifestyles. Even most people know me through special needs community. I work with people of all sorts, from athletes, professional athletes, all the way down to, let's say, a newborn, right? I'm probably the only one in the world that can tell if a newborn is not okay, and I'm probably the only one in the world that can actually evaluate the movement discrepancies in a professional athlete, to the ability, that way I look at vision and the way I look at fine motor skills, which includes the spine and breathing, differently. Just because, again, and this is why I'm presenting 21 new theories in biological gravity. So, mass to gravity. This is what most of you understand. This is what we've been told our whole life, is that the apple fell down and inspired Mr. Newton, right? The only reason that apple came from that tree is because without rotational and buoyancy responses, gravity is a dominant force as mass appears to be weak, right? So one of my laws is without rotation, gravity seems more difficult. Theories. So when you're lifting your arm up straight versus if I add rotation, and you can do that right now, gravity will appear to be weaker. It does for the shuttle just as much as it appears for us. When otherwise all the apples would fall off the tree, right? It's the apple that is, quote, dying. He's lost his rotation, he's lost his buoyancy, and that's where you're going to come into play. Now, I really want to go in to show you again this opposition with gravity here. So now here is, again, an organism which we see as seed. Now, what's the difference between the seed and myself as far as gravity is concerned? Nothing. You're really going to see, again, look at where the root comes out. So you're going into oppositional force, so you're posing gravity with rotation. So the rotation is starting and going down. Now, if you look in the details of the root system, and you can go on YouTube, there's countless that are going down. This is Temponaut, they do a lot. You're seeing the rotations, the tendril, all of this, down to, again, the fine motor skills, have the same kind of organization. But it's a rotational force. You do that in the sand at the beach. If I were to stick my hand in, I can't get into the sand if I use rotation. Your plant is doing the same thing. So the main theories of my work, right, is that to oppose gravity, you need a rotational movement for living organisms, right? living organisms, as you'll learn in this, is different than mass. My cell phone will always hit gravity, and when I fall, I will come into play with gravity. But I'm not organized to fall. I'm not worried anytime I'm talking to you about falling, right? And you shouldn't be either. If not, you're my client, right? And this is my specialty. So if you look at the root system coming down, right? So when it takes off out of the seed, now you have opposing force, and that rotation has to kick in. If that rotation doesn't kick in, and this is what I'm going to show you in this video, that plant won't grow, right? And you can say, oh, but they all have the same sunlight and they all have the same water. Nobody's looking at and addressing the quality and the responses of rotational movement in opposition to gravity, right? And again, so right here, you're going to see this. I'm going to bring this back a little bit because it's really key. So as this is growing, right? So again, so now I have oppositional rotation. It's very simplistic, but bam, it has to go through the dirt. Now anyone, and immediately you see the rotation, and now it's more than obvious. This guy's going. That rotation, it's what's going to use for the dynamics to create a plant that has viability. If you look now on YouTube, you're going to be looking at every slow-mo out there. You will see this rotation, okay? But if you start looking at the other seeds, even though the root system started out correctly, you can see already here, you know what I mean, the dynamics of size, but more so the dynamics of oppositional rotation, right? And we do this on sports. We say that the big top players will be better than, you know, we look at size matters, but really it's the quality of the movements, right? Kobe Bryant was an exceptional, Michael Jordan was an exceptional, because they opposed gravity and they had rotational responses even in their vision and their difference. Now you see the difference of this rotation. I'm just going to stop this for a second or put it back. The rotation that you have here in opposition, this guy's gone. He's out of the park. But what's interesting, what I want you to watch here is that the seedling didn't shake the head and it didn't establish an oppositional rotation to its viability. So this little guy will, because again, this is where the mass will supersede the might, right? Because the rotation's not there and he cannot oppose gravity, right? You can blame it on genetics and everything like that, but if you're looking, there's always a foundation, right? You can say, well, the reason I can't use rotation because I had a stroke. I'm not arguing the diagnosis, right? But what I'm saying here is what you're learning in this course is the movement dynamics. And I really have learned anyone with special needs, stroke, Parkinson's, MS, the common denominator is lack of rotation. The failure to astronauts in outer space, the common movement denominator is lack of rotational movements. It just is. And I'll show you that in some of the stuff that they do. But anyway, this melon plant does not have more strength. It has more functional rotation in opposition to gravity. Look at the difference of the quality of the rotation. Even this one has a seedling, but you see how, and there the rotation really can start taking off. He can't shake it, and he never gets to become a plant, right? Just based off of that. And you can even see coming back. Again, the quality of the rotation, and it makes a difference. That has to be studied, especially who we're putting into outer space. There has to be during, and post articulation of rotational responses, functional movement for each astronaut. Because I might be the smartest person to go out there, right? But you might say, I don't have the best body because I don't have that stamina to run the 5 miles. They're looking for a very athletic person, what they've deemed, and they do mean athletics with muscles, and really functional movement is what's going to sustain anybody in outer space. I love this MRI of the apple, right? Again, the opposition, right? We see the exterior of the apple. And again, every apple doesn't fall from the tree. It's just the one that is dying. Because when the rotation and the buoyancy stops within the apple, gravity becomes a dominant force and will, in a sense, pull down. Same thing when we're dying. We can't walk down the hallway, right? And again, you can say that I'm dying the reason I don't have rotation. But what I'm trying to say is I can evaluate you and find that the rotation is going first. Like if you're a professional football player, I can add 2 years to your life, right? Just based off of, because what you're saying, injury, getting old. But I can tell you, all your dynamics of those injuries also have the same principles of lack of rotational responses in opposition to gravity. And once you're afraid to tear the arm, or you're afraid to, and those are valid. This is not flight or flight. They're valid, intelligent decisions, right? They will affect everything that you're doing. There's always sudden causes, sudden heart attack or something like that. But even with the heart, if you were in the gravity and movement program in our group, you will really see that. I've already covered that, how, again, the rotations even in the helical structure of the heart. But if you look at the apple here, and with him moving with the MRI, right, you can see, again, it looks very much like the planet Earth, right? You don't see the full cores, but in the sense, it almost looks like that electromagnetic field. And that's our apple. Again, there should be an essential triangle of gravity, rotation, and buoyancy that maintain. These are things that you're going to be learning in the course. The course is a 12-week course. It's very substantial, going over all the aspects of living organisms within the gravitational interaction. No difference really than what you're going to be looking at as the Earth's core. Now, I was looking at, I was working with someone, and when I really get someone moving, especially the runners, the athletes, the runners, I can feel the gyroscope. There's a main gyroscope within the pelvic region. Subgyros, I believe, are in the ankles, wrist, and back of the head, right? Those gyroscopes, I mean, when you're sitting there doing a relay race and all of those kind of things, I'm talking high-end performers. Not something a third grader would do per se. There's an active gyroscope, right? Gymnasts and all that, you'd see them, they'll just backflip forever. And so when I realized that I was feeling this in the body, I knew I had to have counter-oppositional movements, right? So I'd ask someone, I said, the Earth's cores, they rotate in opposite directions, don't they? Because I was feeding off of that. No difference in you riding a bicycle, right? In that kind of force, but that's a different type of force. That's not a gravitational. Do not think that you're going to not learn that other forces of nature are not based off of gravity. They're forces, but they're not how we organize neurologically, cognitively, and biomechanically. So when you're going into that, and two, we were told we had a solar system, the Earth rotates. You can really see it when you're looking, and this is Vsauce. It's a great video that you can watch on Vsauce. First of all, not only are we not orbiting the sun, in a sense, we're spiraling, and some believe we're chasing the sun. I almost want to look at electromagnetic coils, and where you can float, similar to what you do with the trains. Are we creating such a force through our gravitational movements that we're not, in a sense, propelling the sun and keeping that connection? That's where Newton's law comes in, where mass attracts mass, and that's how we're propelling in outer space. Again, that's not my forte. I'll delve into those thoughts to help you start coming to your own conclusions. But if you really look at, so what the Earth is doing is more like this, but now if I spread it out, it starts looking like the flower. Sorry, I had my rotation backwards. The Earth starts this way, and it goes like this. I'm spreading out that rotation, right? But that rotation is there, and it continues as we're moving. We're also going right now approximately 1,000 miles per hour, but if I jump, this wall's not going to hit me in the head. So again, how we organize rotation to rotation, same with your plant. If you hold it up, it's not going to fall down. So again, you'll see it in the galaxies, right? Planetary rotation. One of my theories is any organism that has oppositional rotation also creates life. So you can look at this with the moon. The moon doesn't have, now it has a lunar rotation, that's different. Does not have an internal core rotation. It will not support life. If we colonize the moon, I'm telling you right now, just that organization of its rotation or lack of rotation, based off of my principles, will kill a human being. So if we colonize the moon, we're going to have to create colonies that have this oppositional gravity there, enough to tease the brain, versus going to Mars. Mars is the better option. We still have issues with radiation and atmosphere and all of that stuff, not oxygen, water. Those I concur with. I'm telling you and teaching you new theories on how to organize movement. Again, so the moon, right, is the diminished lack of core rotation or the lack of objects, right? So there's no atmosphere, so there's no life force, right? Asteroids, all of those kind of things. Anything that doesn't have an internal core rotation, you're not going to see where it supports life. Now, I look at life as the exchange of molecules. So the sun is a life force, right? It does create life. You can't put a plant on the sun, it would burn. We have a very immature, limited view of what we look at as life. We think, again, water, oxygen, and temperature. Right? We're thinking of us. And that's why, again, you can go into all the things, is there life in outer space? Well, there has to be, because there's galaxies. All of these things have to be. But they might not be like us in that sense, where 5 fingers and 5 toes on each side. But at the same time, there's going to be some kind of organisms of going. So this is more centrifugal force in space, and that's different than gravitational force. And again, you see all this. When inanimate objects, right? So the biggest rule of an inanimate object is they're unable to oppose gravity, right? My cell phone's never going to jump off the table, nor is a book. But I can oppose gravity, right? So I'm not an inanimate object, obviously, right? They're unable to create rotation, unable to create perpetual motion, meaning that continued motion. There has to be an exterior force. You can say, oh yes, there's immature. No. This, my myosin Atkin with rotating, synchronized rotation, will always give me a perpetual rotation. If not, babysit a 2-year-old who's not tired, right? They're just like little ever-ready body. And then you go, aren't you tired? No. And then all of a sudden they crash. Because the way the muscles dynamics, because they're going into their spinning milestones. From 2.5 years old to 5, right? Cartwheels, somersaults, riding a bicycle. All those kind of milestones, spinning on a chair for hours, right? They are spinning milestones that need to be created. They're not being created so much anymore because of the iPad and the phone, and it's creating variations in our vestibular system. And therefore, those people, those children, aren't going to master skills. You will not see them at the Olympics, let's say, or at a very big Ivy League. It really will stunt the way that because it'll change their spatial orientation and their power. Something like this, right? But what this is now, that he's now added a skateboard, right? And this is why we're bringing this in. We can't spin the space station because he's now going into that inertia that's pulling the body downward, right? And that inertia is coating the body wrong. How do I know that's a problem? Any person that gets addicted to this force, right, has a very hard time in relationships, in work, and social. Right? It's like, dude, search up and kind of thing. And they will just drop everything for skiing, for surfing, for skateboarding. When the nervous system switches over this, and I'm telling you right now, we can't spin a space station for that because we are never pulled to gravity. We bind with gravity, but we are not pulled. So now we're going into gravity and rotation. You're going to see this now as you're going through the course, as you're going through You Can't Get to Mars Without Me book. And learning all these new aspects of how we organize within gravity. The universe has been doing it all along, right? It's all been happening. It's been going on. Again, it's not only planetary rotation, right? But the star's rotation creates a life force needed for living organism. Again, when you're looking at the sun, it is a living organism, right? The living organism, under my definitions, are the exchange of molecules. So the sun is a living organism. Now, you can't grow a plant on the sun, but it is a living organism, as is the planet Earth, as is Mars, as is Jupiter. The moon is not a living organism because it does not have these principles of rotation, right? And we're going to get into that now, from atoms, nucleuses, all the way up to galaxies and solar systems. And that will continue because, again, that is life. That is how we organize. This rotation, or the rotation based off of different areas, is how that organism generates life. That's why Jupiter has a different life force, in a sense, than Earth does. And that's okay because that's for its rotational base within gravity. Making life multiplanetary. This is where we're going, guys. We are going to multiplanetary facets. We are looking seriously to recolonize, or I shouldn't say recolonize, colonize the moon, but we're going back to re-enter the moon conversations. You'll start learning that the moon is based off of motion. That is not how we organize. And unless they take these principles that you're learning, and that's why you guys are going to be on the forefront taking this course on understanding how movement works within the human body, but also within living organisms for us to be sustained. Getting us off this rock has already been proven. We can do that. It's maintaining a life force outside of what we think of as the atmosphere is what's difficult for human beings. And again, that's why you're coming back to the second of the webinars, going into what is motion, and you're going to see sort of we've been doing the same thing for the past 60 years and not getting too far. We have to look at sustaining us as beings. here on Earth as well as in outer space. And to do that, we have to understand how we move and how we live. And it's not just, a circulatory system. So again, I really hope that you're enjoying You Can't Get to Mars Without Me. It is required reading going into Gravity and Movement course, right? You're going to sign up today for the next cycle of courses that we're going into. I'm representing this course. It is a 12-week course that we're going into every quarter to pick up people that are just getting into the book now. I really hope that you are excited into the book right now and you really want to understand all the concepts. Obviously, not everything can be put into the book. The book right now, I had to drop my 21 theories of biological gravity. As I continue to write and present, this is what we're going to be going into, is how we are going to maintain our life force here on Earth and in multiplanetary situations. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next webinar. In the next webinar, we're going to be covering what is motion. Most of physics, most of science is based off of motion, not movement. The processes of movement, right? A functional movement is what you and I do to turn a page of a book. We can manipulate movement. We are nonlinear beings that we were covering. We're really going to be going into that space-based programs or what they're doing based off of motion. Load lift variations based off of a lever joint, let's say, is a motion, just like if you have an access point through the planet Earth, but that's not functional movement. That is not what we do to sustain life.